Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CFO Summit. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Matt Pileski, Regional CFO, AJG. We are excited to have Matt and our panelists for a panel discussion titled CFOs and Digital Transformation. Welcome, Matt. Over to you.
Hello, welcome everybody. I'm very happy to be here today with two colleagues, Eugene and Monica. A little background on myself. I've been with Arthur Gallagher here, which is an insurance brokerage, for the past 17 years. And for the past 10, I've been in the Northeast and really growing both through mergers and acquisitions and organically. So we've had a lot of evolution of that time. As we've grown significantly, we've had to make some investments in core infrastructure in order to, streamline things. So with that, Eugene, I'll pass it over to you if you can give a little background on yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eugene Spivakov. I'm currently treasurer at a company called Sixth Sense. I'm also leading Corp FP&A, and I had a few FinOps functions as well. Sixth Sense is a private venture-backed SaaS company and very, very fast growing. So it's an exciting place to be. Prior to Sixth Sense, I have been with a number of semiconductor companies. So I came from a place where I've seen a lot of, it was a lot of public companies with a regular kind of a finance rigor of quarterly disclosures and quarterly filings. I've been primarily in the treasury roles with these semiconductor companies. The last company that I was with before joining Sixth Sense was Cypress Semiconductor, which was acquired by Infineon Technologies. So I've seen the transformation of Cypress prior to acquisition. I've seen the transformation of the combined company because it was a very large acquisition for Infineon. So I've seen this transformation and integration. And now being in a private, fast-growing company, I'm seeing another part of finance and how it reacts and transforms to the challenges associated with this kind of a hyper growth. So excited to be here. Look forward to our discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to Monica.
Hey, everybody. Monica Ciesielczyk. I am a senior director at Novavax. So I have been with Novavax since 2019, prior to the COVID pandemic. So it has been really exciting for us. We grew rapidly. I started as a P&A director with a limited staff, grew the finance, grew the P&A team for Novavax, and then supported other functions as necessary. As we were growing rapidly, we were hiring quickly and growing our tools and solutions. Prior to that, I was with a nonprofit, also supporting R&D activities. My responsibilities span across finance and also operations. And a while back, I worked in accounting, supporting mutual funds, multiple trade per day mutual ETFs. It was really fun in those days. Thank you so much. Matt, back to you.
Okay, so our first question really is just on how the finance function has evolved over the years and whether it's been through technology or just, envisions changing and what we're supporting. Did you want to add your comments on kind of like what kind of change you've seen in finance in your time, Eugene?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I have a little bit of a interesting vantage point because I've been through basically with three companies in the last maybe over 4 years or so. One because I changed roles and the other one because of an acquisition. So I'd say the question on evolution of finance function, it really depends on what the role of finance function needs to be and what challenges it needs to address within an organization. And then the evolution basically has growth to get to what challenges that this finance group needs to address. So for example, when I was a Cypress Semiconductor, when we were an independent company, there was a lot of focus on potential growth and how we address that growth, whether organic or inorganic. So there's a lot of focus on scalability and what systems and processes we need to have in place in order to be able to capture and capitalize on this growth and be successful at it. When the acquisition happened, when Infineon acquired Cypress Semiconductors, there was a lot of focus on integration. It was a large acquisition. The key to make this acquisition successful, you have to bring the companies together. You have to integrate. So there's a lot of focus, again, from the process perspective and also from the technology perspective, how we would bring these two companies together. And this is particularly important for the Americas, where Cypress had a very large presence, obviously. So that's kind of it's probably not necessarily the evolution, but the challenges that finance needs to address, and they had to step in and start to execute initiatives to methodically address these challenges. And I've stayed with Infineon 2 years post-integration. I've seen kind of the success of the integration that we were able to achieve. And I'm also seeing other things that were slated to be done down the road, also part of the integration. I'd say the most challenging things would be when you have to integrate ERPs, but eventually I think that was part of the roadmap too. And then with Sixth Sense, I mean, it's an exciting place to be because of the growth, and the growth poses several challenges to a company like Sixth Sense. First, the company grew so fast that G&A had to kind of catch up to all this growth. So we need to establish a lot of things, build a lot of processes, put new systems in place, at least start looking at new systems. And then the second challenge is kind of being more forward-looking. You need to be able to once you solve the problems of today, you need to think of the problems of tomorrow, right? So you have to look for that scalability again. You need to look to see what you need to put in place in order to make the company robust and address those challenges of tomorrow, whether it's operating as a public company at some point, staying as a private company, but at a much larger volume. So there's all these challenges that growth creates, and without the right finance function, it's going to be very hard to address these challenges. And again, I mean, the evolution of the finance function that I've seen it kind of runs the gamut. It goes from, hey, we're just here to support the business, all the way to, hey, we're going to be driving the business, right? So as the company gets larger and as you address problems of today, you get into more of the strategic mode. And that's where a lot of, I guess, processes and systems come in. If you want to be, a lot of CFOs say want to be a data-driven company. Well, for a data-driven company, you need to make sure you have the right data. You need to make sure you have the right tools, the right systems, to process that data and to become kind of more strategic advisor to the business rather than, as I might put it, just be a bean counter. So yeah, so to summarize, I mean, the evolution that I've seen, especially in hyper growth spaces, going from this kind of defensive, just need to catch up, to how do we become strategic and forward-looking and address the future needs of the business.
Well, I think just a couple things here. Interesting about what you said with the acquisition integration. I think that is very interesting because every acquisition is a little bit different. And from myself, I've seen like our acquisition process evolve, where now we have SWAT teams that help us get the data, help them get us on our do the core stuff first. And that really enables you to spend more time on the people, getting the right people in the right roles and the right positions, and really saying, hey, how can we make it more about revenue growth than just cost consolidations with the acquisitions we do. So I thought those were all great comments. And Monica, why don't you kind of give some of your experiences on the evolution of finance?
Yeah, so that's really good one. I really like hearing from you both. Um, for me, what I observe and I over the last couple of years and has been really meaningful is how we in finance, especially like in my role FP&A, we're moving away from just counting pretty much like summing numbers in Excel to actually becoming to actually being there to support the business, becoming part of the business to help them make better decision. And that has been really meaningful. And with that, we also were working to develop systems that are able to support us through the process. But also we have to then work with the systems to ensure that they can support us throughout the journey. And I really like what Eugene mentioned before about different companies, right, where he was and how things were moving really rapidly. I experienced the same thing with Novavax when I started. We were R&D and really were reporting how much we spent on different projects and different products, and then rapidly move away from that to actually different reporting structure, establishing new subsidiaries, and moving into consolidation. But even at consolidation, we learned that, okay, well, there are different ways of reporting to SEC, but then also different ways to report to the management. So having systems that are flexible enough that allows us to do that became extremely important. That was really quick. And then the other thing was that suddenly the FP&A function split into different ones, right? It was a business support, but also now my function became really big one with a CFO office support, executive leadership. And then the other thing what we established was Adaptive Insights Center of Excellence, where we're working with other finance business leaders to develop systems and tools that will be able to support the whole organization.
Well, I think the common thing I'm hearing from both of you is like the finance evolution kind of somewhat follows the business strategy and things we're doing, and whether we're trying to get economies of scale with centers of excellence or M&A integration. It's all kind of, we have to follow the strategy of the business. So I think our second question here is like, how do we really measure if our evolution is successful? Like, what are the things that we do as a support function to say, hey, we are being successful business advisors for the business? How do you kind of measure yourself, Eugene?
Well, I'd say that overall, if you want to measure success, right? I mean, you need to figure out what the initial task was, or what the initial problem that you were solving, right? So if you're transforming an organization because there's a particular need and the business has shifted, the business is either it's a large organization, it has a different focus. If a CFO embarks on a transformation, there needs to be an initial vision of where we want to be. Here, you need to understand where we are now, where we need to be in the future. The transformation itself is not necessarily about what technology you're going to implement. I think technology comes at the tail end of the exercise. It starts with a vision, it develops into strategy, and then tools are just the tools to get you there. So if you want to gauge, okay, has this transformation or evolution been successful? The question is, did we achieve the vision that we initially set out to achieve? And if the answer is yes, and we're now in a place where we want it to be, then you're successful. If transformation just ended up implementing a few systems that are great tools, but it's not necessarily making your organization be the strategic partner that you want it to be, for example, or if you want it to be a more scalable company, well, you have the tools, but you didn't achieve scalability, then it's not a successful transformation. So again, what I say is, know what you want to achieve, and the success depends on whether you actually achieved it rather than what tools you ended up implementing. So yeah, and then in general, I'd say that, you know, if you have specific pain points and maybe you have some pain points right now, and you address those needs, I'd say it's more of a tactical thing. I think for this evolution transformation, that thing needs to be very strategic. It's not just like we have, you know, our process is inefficient in accounts payable, so we're going to implement the system. Like, well, that's great, that's tactical, but on the CFO level, I would think if you taking your organization to the next level, then there needs to be a strategy that follows it of how you're going to get there, how you're going to execute that vision. And again, the tools, because we all focus on, hey, what kind of systems we're going to implement, but that to me comes at the tail end of the process, not at the front end of it.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense there. I would agree. You kind of have to measure yourself based on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, I think in my scenario, I think we always measure ourselves based on who is using the information we're providing. I think one of the interesting things I started my company in 2006, and I listened to the earnings call. And before I started, they talked about 4 things, and it was M&A growth, organic growth, efficiency, and our people. We still talk about those same 4 things today, even though we have different tools to talk about those things. And we've made a ton of investments in data, but sometimes we have the data we provided and nobody has a question. Well, so if we're making these investments in data and we're providing information because we can provide it and it's not being used, it's very important that the data we're providing, one, not only is it used, but it also is providing something that we can kind of put into a narrative or something that's easy for people to understand. It needs to be simple, because if I can give you the dictionary to read it with tons of data, but that doesn't help people make decisions. What we need to do is present data with the tools we have in a way that, you know, says, how are we measuring our strategic initiatives? And then the proof is in the pudding, whether the business finds our support useful or not. So with that, Monica, how do you see your evolution being measured?
Yeah, so I agree with both of you, and I'll just add to that in the end, if we don't have the picture, right, how do we want our organization to look like, or what will be the end outcome of the analysis, we cannot implement the right tools. So the example of that I could use would be that a while back when we were working on implementing when I was working on implementing ERP system, the approach there was to really replicate the previous accounting system, and that wasn't, as you can imagine, the best approach, because what happened was that there was nobody, we didn't take advantage of the functionality of the new system, right? We just apply a template, and in the end, the ERP system didn't function to its capabilities. It will be an example of how you don't perform the best transformation. So you have to have a roadmap and to understand where you are heading, and then understand what kind of steps you need to take, what will be the stages. I personally, right now, I'm working on transition and transforming our financial planning tool. As I mentioned before, when I started with the company, it was really utilized for R&D reporting. Where we are right now, where we're heading, we are a global company with multiple subsidiaries, with international revenue, and we have to be able to provide different type of managerial views depending who we are talking to. In addition to that, we are working on adding subsidiaries to our financial planning as well, to allow them ability to take advantage and automate how they are currently performing planning. So, but understanding where do we want to be as a company is extremely important. Without that, any implementation, right, and the transformation will not be successful.
Yeah, I kind of want to just jump in and echo a few
Go.
things that Matt and Monica said. Again, it depends on what the role of finance is or in an organization. But at every stage, at every particular niche that finance occupies, it can be more effective, less effective. And I think some of the processes and tools can help you get there. For example, if finance is more of a reporting type of organization, and that's what its current role is, then there's different ways to report things. You can provide the numbers and say, here you go, I've done it, or you can actually explain what these numbers mean. You basically report it both times, but you provide a lot more support for the company if you actually provide interpretation of what these numbers mean. And to provide interpretation, you need to be able to dig into things and understand what the drivers are, what's driving the numbers, what are the outcomes, and then you can start thinking more strategically. Okay, if you want to get to a different type of outcome, what kind of inputs we need. So I think all of these things, as finance evolves and as you embark on some of these transformations, getting the right process and tools in place can help you go from being maybe less strategic to more strategic. But even if you're whatever niche that you currently occupy, you can deliver a lot more bang for the buck, so to speak, if you have the right process and the right tools in place. And that's where the transformation comes in, and implementation of your systems is can you get the right tools to get you the data, their ability to do this analysis that will be very useful to your company.
I think that all makes a lot of sense. I think it even goes into kind of like, well, how are we, next question is basically, how is automation really, how is that affecting the cost structure of really finance in total? And I think the answer then again, there to me is it depends. Like, are we implementing it in a way that's scalable and allows us to get more information more quickly? Or, are we analyzing lots of disparate things and actually analyzing more? I think this goes in with like the whole ground up. I can measure everything. There's a cost to measuring everything. If you kind of take the more top-down approach, well then, and if you can roll it up more quickly with automation, then you can get narratives more quickly. But this even goes to sometimes it's like, well, if we're looking, sometimes we'll get a report and it'll tell us what the average cost is. What it won't tell you is there were 10 items in there and 6 of them were $10 and one of them cost, $100,000. So you have outliers driving the data. So you still kind of need, to make sure you're looking at that data and telling the appropriate story. And I don't know, Eugene, if you want to add kind of like how you see like the cost structure changing as we automate more. Are we achieving scale, or is it just more work?
Yeah, no, I mean the automation can definitely deliver cost savings, right? I mean, it's a question of the ROI, right? I mean, you have to invest in systems, and to implement them, you probably save on by not having to have as many people doing the same thing, and the people can scale up and do more strategic things, right? So there's direct cost savings, but I mean, I think there's also a lot of indirect impacts if you get the right systems and implement the right tools, right? I mean, one indirect impact would be you get data more accurately, so you spend less time wasting time chasing discrepancies, because in finance, I mean, in all my years working in finance, every time there's a close, there are always questions like, well, why doesn't this data tie? You need to go chase things down. So if you have things that are more automated, and if it's set up correctly, you can either drill down faster to find out what the root cause is, or you can prevent those mistakes in the first place. It was a mistake that was driving the discrepancy, because mistakes happen all the time as well, right? I mean, that's why we do need humans to kind of look after things as well and make sure things make sense. Another indirect impact, I think, is the speed, right? So if you have the right systems in place, and you can act with speed, you can get the the answers faster. And the speed matters, because if it takes you too long to get a particular answer, to get some kind of actionable data, well, the time for action might have already passed. So it's critical a lot of times to act fast, and this automation can help you get the results faster. So it could be cheaper and faster, but again, it needs to be done right. Matt, as you said, you need to make sure that you're trying to get the right thing. If you just automate everything and you get a ton of data, you don't know what to do with it, it's not gonna do anybody any good. I mean, it might be a lot of interesting facts, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that, well, ideally that something's actionable and you can actually advise the business to take certain actions, or even guide the business to take certain actions that would benefit the company overall.
Yeah, I will add to that too, that what I've been hearing from the leadership too is that we need information. It does not have to be 100% accurate, but has to be directionally true, right? So with our ability to access information from the systems and provide this, right, the path forward in certain direction, rather than just saying, hey, we don't have it yet, it will take me a day to consolidate everything. But if you have a system, and the system allows you for some type of data analysis where you can provide directional truth, then you can help the leadership with strategy, right? With guiding them in the appropriate way. And that's what I've been hearing from them, that the sooner I hear a directional truth, the better it will be for me. And then with this one also, the way I feel like now with the system that we have, we can automate certain things. We don't have to rely on the older ERP accounting systems. The systems now allow us to see, right, our financial statements. We can quickly compare things. We can flip analysis and see things differently by departments, by GLs, right? And that having this direction of truth also is very important. I see one question here regarding speed of getting information. I just don't see the full question. Could we maybe, to me, the speed of information is important. Again, it has to be directionally correct. So I would not take the speed over accuracy. But what I've been hearing from the CFOs and from the executive leadership in my role is we need something.
Yeah, I guess sometimes something could be better than nothing, but you got to make sure that, like I said, direction has to be correct.
Exactly, directionally correct, but because I believe that the leadership tends to be often tired of hearing, hey, we'll have to wait a week before we analyze the data, right? Versus we can overall, it looks like we were heading this way. It might be, it might be roughly 10, 15 millions different direction, right? But directionally, we are up or down. That might be good enough.
Yeah, I think there's a related question on do we just provide, or do any of us provide not just the data, but what the numbers mean, and the specific levers to get to something actionable. I'd say that's kind of the key, right? If finance is only reporting numbers without even diving into what the numbers mean, that's probably the least value that finance brings. I think, to me, even if you, as I mentioned before, like even if you're only reporting, if you can explain what the numbers mean, that would be extremely valuable to the business. And to answer that question, yes, I mean, we always want to dive in to understand what the numbers mean, and also what are the drivers. I mean, I can give specific examples. For example, in SaaS world, you're looking at your retention ratios, and there's gross retention ratios, net retention ratios. Well, these are just numbers, but the story behind the numbers talk about, well, how much do the customers like the business, or how much do the customers like your product? Do they just buy for a year or two and then they churn, or do they buy for a year or two and then they end up buying more and more of it? So yeah, there's absolutely, the value that finance brings is in explaining the numbers and understanding what these numbers mean. And then if you see certain trends that are concerning, or on the flip side, they're positive, you want to highlight it and take some action to either, if it's positive, to keep pushing in that direction, if it's concerning, to address the concerns.
No, I think those are all great points. I think kind of the other thing, I mean, so I guess if we go into like the levers, like which ones are available, I think it's always our job to partner with the business to make sure they understand the levers. And then even if they think they have a lever for us to kind of quantify what would that impact to be. And the things would be like slowing down traveling, slowing down hiring, like making, you know, structural changes that might save some money. I think the more we can work with them to help basically quantify and educate them on basically like, here's your menu of options you can choose to influence the numbers, and then let's make sure they're aware of what they can do. I think some other questions are coming in here. One of them here is, you know, so I think, how do we, when there's change with employees, like what's finance's role in kind of making sure, hey, as we're making new investments and employees need to adapt, change, like what's our role in really helping manage change as we make investments in technology? Do either one of you want to take that?
Yes, so I believe that we are being again in finance, we are working with the systems all the time. There's some type of level of expectations of us understanding systems faster. That's what I've seen than other people. Probably like finance and IT, right? That seems to be correlated in some ways with understanding how things are usually working. Especially, so I feel like that in finance, it's like we have a huge role in training employees, new employees, but also who are our peers, but also leaders of a company, what things really mean, which will be numbers that we are presenting, but also how to use the systems to provide with information. Here I'm also referring to abilities of different tools that we can use to automate accessing information, right? So when I started with one of our leaders, the message that he was sharing, data democratization, which is how can we give access to information to others so they can make decisions. So with this one, we'll be educating them how they can access information, how those tools actually work, which will be dashboards with financial data, how to read them and understand them, Power BI tools, or other tools that will be appropriate for them. Eugene, do you have other things to add?
Yeah, I'd say that overall, you know, the question on adoption, right? I mean, how do we get people to buy in what we're doing and adopt a new, whether it's a process or system, right? Because there's always reluctance to change, and people do things the way they've done things. So there needs to be something in it for them to go beyond their comfort zone to take on a new system or implement a new process. I'd say, I mean, it's a broader kind of change management question. How do you manage change within your organization? But on a more tactical level, I'd say, whenever you implement change, you know, make sure you understand who your stakeholders are. Make sure you know what's in it for them, right? The worst thing you can probably do is implement something that only you care about and doesn't do anybody any good. So if you cannot communicate value in what you're doing to others, then you probably question, like, is this the right thing? Should I even be spending time on it? But if you can't communicate that value, then it's more about communication and getting the stakeholders on board, because you can explain what they're going to get out of it. And overall, implementing change, you know, you look at your stakeholders, you look at who you depend on and who's going to depend on you, right? What influence they have within an organization. Timing is important. You probably don't want to approach everybody at the same time. If you undertaken a particular change, you want to approach specific key people and then roll it out slowly. The other thing I would say is to make it we're talking about kind of implementation, making it successful, don't try to boil the ocean, right? And people are scared of big changes, so make it small. And have grand vision, but have a baby step strategy to get there, and make sure that people are coming along. It's not always about the process. It's also about the people that are going to be involved in that process.
Okay. Another question here is, have we seen things where there's been inefficient transformation, where we've seen technology gone wrong, where we need to pivot, maybe make some changes? Do you have any experiences where maybe things aren't working exactly as they were planned, and then we basically need to pivot to something else? Any advice on? That could just be the monthly close process as I think about it, because there's always things that don't go perfect.
They always go perfect, Matt. Yeah, so I mentioned before, like in one of my past experiences, ERP system that had such a huge expectation in front of it, right? But unfortunately, the approach that was taken wasn't the most efficient one, wasn't the strategic one, right? Eugene, you've been talking about this a lot. It was, well, just replicate something that used to work for us and see how this works. It didn't go so well, because there is a difference between ERP system and something else that is much smaller, and replicating this, right? So if you do this way, at first it might be good enough, but as you grow with the system, you realize that unfortunately modules might not really talk to each other. The international commercial pricing reporting that you wanted to have, it's not the way how you want to. Maybe other functionalities such as exchange rates, conversions module might not be talking so well to each other, right? So lessons learned there is definitely to evaluate, hey, can we fix it? How much does it cost? Or the other way is, what would happen if we actually did it from the very beginning? Because sometimes it's also about, hey, you might not know what you need to do, like what you really need, right? You just know that you need something different, and that approach might not be actually the best place to implement new system. It might be better to wait a bit longer to actually spend more time on researching and figuring out what do you really need, how the picture should look like, and then implement them.
Yeah, I'd say I'll throw in another perspective there. I mean, there's probably a lot of wrong ways to implement something, but there's probably no only a right way to do it. And you hear stories all the time that, hey, we got this system and we thought it was going to do this, and turns out it's not nearly close to what we expected. I'd say another approach, and it doesn't work in all cases, but if you have a modular system, don't try to implement the whole thing at once, right? I mean, maybe just implement, again, I'm a big favor of baby steps, right? So implement one step at a time, you take some small wins, and if it works, you go to the next step. If you see that your system not working, or maybe that particular provider, you expect them to be strong in a particular area and they're not, well, don't go for the second or third module. You can pivot and go back. I mean, we've recently implemented a system. I don't want to say which particular one, just because there are a few providers in that space, but the system was modular, and we implemented the first module, and I kind of looked at it like, hey, it works okay, but not great. A lot of things that we thought there are not there. Well, we opted out not to go for the second module. We can pivot, so you're not as invested in it. It's much easier to pivot than if you just did everything up front. So to me, lay out some specific steps, have a clear vision, but be flexible enough to consider workarounds. If something's not working, don't be in for a penny, in for a pound, right? I mean, be flexible.
Okay. About 10 minutes left here, so we'll switch now to some of the audience questions here coming in. First question was, how does the advent of the AI impact the modern CFO? And I think this is really business model and speed. You get more information faster, in my opinion, and then you just have to realize that it's all based on understanding the underlying business model that created that AI is interpreting, because the business is always changing. So understanding the constraints. Want to take that question?
I would also add,
I can.
yes, I'll just finish quickly. Eugene, I will give it back to you.
Go ahead.
Yes. So here I'll just add to that exactly that's that model building, but also the big one here with AI was that you have to have underlying historical data. So if you are in the situation like where my company actually is, that every year seems to be so different from the other one, then AI might not be as impactful. So if you have a 2 years of pretty good, steady historical data sets, then AI might be really helpful. But then you have to really understand your business. I saw another question somewhere there too that was actually talking about it too. How do you spot if AI does something that it shouldn't, right? The answer is not accurate. It is really about knowing your business. You will be able to understand that some blip doesn't look right because it just shouldn't be there, because you know your business well enough. Eugene, back to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I just want to take a little kind of a longer term perspective. I know AI is like the big thing, a lot of questions around AI, and it's, with ChatGPT, everybody's attention on it. I mean, even though AI has been a lot longer than ChatGPT. But if you think about AI, it's just another step in technological evolution, right? I mean, how did calculators transform CFO's organization, right? I mean, there's always technological evolution. The one question with AI is this time different? Maybe it is, right? Maybe there are things, I mean, I'd say in general, it's probably above my pay grade, and it's probably a lot of people that are looking into that question, and I don't think anybody has a clear answer right now. Is AI any different than any other technology? But we need to keep it in that context, right? We need to say, hey, AI is not the first piece of technology that evolved. We've been there before. As far as impact on organization, we always implemented new technologies, and it made certain things faster, more accurate. The question is not how effective technology is. The question is, how are we using it? And as Monica said, if you don't have the right data to feed into a model, you're not going to get the right result, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. I would venture to say it's going to be the same thing with AI. If you don't have the right structure, the right data to start with, you're probably not going to get the right outcome. And also, like what Monica said, you need to understand your business, right? Whether it's artificial intelligence or natural intelligence, somebody comes up to you with a result, you need to be able to know whether it makes sense or not, at least do a sanity check. If you know your business and you get a result that looks odd, you need to be able to at least say, hey, this looks odd. Is it something different than we're doing now that's creating this result that's unexpected? Or is it some kind of error in the model judgment? And I think, again, these things have been happening all the time. I mean, we've had, people made mistakes for probably as long as the company's been around, and before that, and they're looking at the outcome and can question it. And that's why you need a team. That's why you need strong organizations to be able to catch those mistakes, address those mistakes, and get to the right answers.
Okay.
Also address question number 7, right? Which was, is there any protection from AI when AI gets it incorrectly, right? So, and the same question. Very good. Good teamwork.
I think some of the other questions on here, I mean, look, like, is there going to be government regulation? There might be. I mean, we don't know. What's the next black swan event? If we knew the future,
yeah. Well, if we knew what the next black swan event is, it probably wouldn't be a black swan event, right?
Right. Or we would be able. We would have a magic ball, right? That we can all spin it around and tell you. It will be
Yeah,
But
very
I
fast.
mean,
yeah, I think in general, AI has a potential to be extremely disruptive and possibly not in a good way. So I think the potential is there. I think the experts in the field do recognize that. I mean, certain things that I've read, I mean, there's definitely concerns about AI's potential, AI's application, not just in business, but in various other spheres, especially when you're talking about military, any kind of, I don't know, how can the government regulate it, right? I mean, there's all kinds of downside risks to AI, probably just like there is with a lot of other technologies, maybe to a greater extent. So I guess we'll find out, years down the road how to unfold it. I mean,
Yeah, and I'll
the
just
only
also
thing,
add, yes, sorry, Eugene, I'll just also add to that. Yeah, I
yeah,
totally agree with you. However, that when we have ability to automate things, right, either via AI or other tools, hey, let's go for it, right? If we can tell somebody, hey, can you write an equation and then do this type of model, and even Excel now can do some AI work for us, which is kind of cool. Let's go for it, right? They just spend less time working on models and more time, going for walks, taking those extra steps that we need. But we just have to be careful reviewing those models, making sure that they make sense.
yeah, totally agree with you. It seems technology should make our life easier, but every time we apply new technology, our lives just get more complicated for some reason, more complex.
Yeah. Yeah, so somebody had a question about tools available for companies with a tight budget. I think that we're all heading in the direction right now. I would just say there are certain tools that have, I don't think we'll be sharing the names, that, but there are some tools like Excel is becoming more and more automated, actually have a AI functionality built in there from time to time if you have this, if you are able to access. The other option will be there are some FP&A tools that you can use that might be less expensive than others. And then the way how we can approach it that too would be that having those tools would automate some functionality, so you might not have to hire extra help, right, consulting or others to satisfy those requirements. So you can kind of offset this in this way that you might have to hire extra people, but you might, by implementing tools, you might be able to automate those functions. So you may approach it in both ways.
And I see there's one other question, maybe I can address it quickly on the data fragmentation and whether finance needs somebody who's the data wrangler to kind of bring it all together. I'd say I agree with that statement that somebody needs to kind of look at the whole thing. I'm not sure if it needs to be somebody within finance or is it business tech and IT. And I think definitely somebody on the business tech side needs to look at the entire tech stack for the company and see how various systems come together, what business needs to address, how they communicate with each other. And, it's very important to make decisions on which systems or the tools you're going to use. Do you want to get the best-in-class tool to address specific problems? Or do you want to get a good enough tool to address each problem, but the one that can address many problems simultaneously? Do you want to have ecosystem of great systems that are kind of fragmented, or one system that's okay, but a lot more consolidated? So yeah, the answer is yes, somebody in finance, somebody needs to look at it. I'm not sure if it needs to be somebody within finance or IT organization, but somebody definitely needs to keep an eye on overall architecture and the tech stack.
Thank you all for such an insightful panel discussion. You were all great. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.